Welcome back. Now we're going to talk about fish tanks, or the home for the fish in your aquaponics system. There are several choices for fish tanks, just like there are for grow beds and some tanks, and you're going to hear a common theme amongst all of them. First is that it's got to start with food-safe materials, using polyethylene, HD polyethylene, HDPE, or fiberglass are always optimal materials because you know that you're going to be perfectly fine with any of those. So I want to start by mentioning Rubbermaid stock tanks. These are the tanks that you'll see out in pasture land for watering cattle. You can find these at feed and grain stores, and they work really well as fish tanks. Another option is IBC totes, intermediate bulk containers. These are the liquid storage containers that are used for shipping all around the world. They work very well as fish tanks. Make sure, though, that you know what was stored in that tank before you use it. It should have been food or a food-safe material. Same thing with storage barrels, these 55-gallon drums. Same rules apply. They would work just fine. You can also use bathtubs as a fish tank. Those work very well, and they're pretty fun, and you're rescuing them from the garbage dump. So that's a nice option. And really, any sort of container that you have, or even a hole in the ground that is lined with pond liner, will work as a fish tank as well. I've grown less and less fond of EPDM liner because that's rubber. And as somebody mentioned to me, do I really want to raise my food in a tire, which is kind of what you're doing? So I've become really big on a polyethylene liner called DuraScrim. That is 100% food safe. It's actually organic certifiable. So DuraScrim liner is a great thing to make your own fish tank. Now, what I want to talk about next, though, is what I consider to be idealized fish tanks that are really pretty optimal. And these are a couple of tanks that we sell. They're made of polyethylene. On the right, I have our 200-gallon tank. And on the left, I have our 300-gallon tank. Now, both of these tanks are 33 inches high, which, as you can see, is just a really nice height. I can look in, but they're not low to the ground, so that if I have small children or pets, that they can actually get into this tank. And that's a consideration. That's something I want you to think about if you sink your tank into the ground. That's a really nice thing to do from a heat and insulation standpoint. However, it might be riskier around safety. So consider that with the height of your tank. Now, the next thing I want you to think about is the fact that the smallest tank that I'm showing you here is 200 gallons. There's a reason for that. We have found that you're going to get the most stability in your aquaponics system right at around 200 gallons and up. Sort of defeats the rule of start small. This is a little bit bigger of a tank. However, you're going to get less fluctuation in temperature and less fluctuation in pH when you go with the bigger tank. So it's going to be a little bit easier for you. Again, not absolutely necessary. If you've got a 100-gallon tank to start with, perfectly fine. You can absolutely have a stable system. It's just going to be easier if you have a little bit bigger tank. The next thing I want you to think about is the fact that these tanks are round. Round is absolutely the optimal style for a fish tank, and aquaculturalists will tell you this all day long. Round is best. The reason for that is that the water can circulate, the fish can circulate, and most importantly for our purposes, the solid waste can be kept suspended. It's not going to settle into pockets or corners of the tank and create anaerobic conditions. So again, non-round tanks work perfectly fine, but better or best is a round tank. The next thing is around surface area. If you have a choice between a tank that's lower and wider, that's going to be better than a tank that's narrower and taller. The reason is you want to optimize the amount of surface area on top of your tank because of oxygen exchange. I can get more oxygen into this tank if I've got a wider surface area in which to do it. Okay, let's talk about covering the tank. Now, fish don't need light. It's not a bad thing to have some light in there, but it's not like, I have people ask me if they actually need to light their fish tank. You do not need to light your fish tank. And in fact, fish like to have some covering and some shade because it helps them feel secure. They don't like to have a lot of people looking into their tank. You also want to keep it covered at the very least so that they can't jump out. Fish will jump out. They're going after bugs. They think life is better on the other side of the tank. I don't know why, but fish do jump out of the tank. And so to prevent that heartbreak from happening, you want to make sure you stay covered. Now, these are what we really like. This is a actual fish netting, and we just drape it across, and on most of our tanks, we actually secure it with cup hooks. So this works really well. Plus, I can feed just by throwing it right in between that netting. So these work nicely. All right, last thing that I want to mention to you is I talked before about the difference between bulkheads and uniseals. Now, if you'll remember, uniseals are flexible. They're rubber and they're flexible, and they create a really nice seam. This is a bulkhead. Now, bulkheads are rigid. They have a rubber gasket on them and then a nut that actually tightens them against the surface. You want to use bulkheads really whenever you can because these are far easier to use than these. These require an awful lot of force to get in. But where you need to use these is when you have a curved or rounded surface like the edge of a round fish tank. You must use this and not this. You won't get a good seal with this. So you will be putting a hole at the top of your fish tank here in order to have the exit pipe that is taking the water out of your fish tank. So that is going to go in the side of your tank. Be very careful about where that hole is. The middle of that hole is going to dictate the height of the water in your fish tank. You don't want it to be all the way up at the top. Again, much more risk of the fish jumping out. We actually recommend going about 6 inches down from the surface of the water. So that is where you use a uniseal. Now, where you want to use a bulkhead is if you have something that we really love about our tanks, which is a flat surface down here for a drain. So you are going to be very happy if you don't buy one of our pre-drilled tanks. Then you're going to be very happy if you take the time to put a hole in there and then put your bulkhead in there and plug it with some sort of a threaded plug. This will give you the ability to very easily drain your tank should you ever need to do that. Now, make sure that when you do that, that your bulkhead is not facing with the top surface out. You want it with the top surface inside the tank and this area out. That gives you the maximum amount of room for your plug. So a little hint there. So that's about it when it comes to fish tanks. Remember that 1-to-1 ratio of the volume of your tank to the volume of your grow beds as a minimum. That's about 6 gallons of water per square foot of growing space. Thank you very much.